Welcome to Who You Calling Holistic. I am your host, Shiana, and I'm here today with Jael. Welcome, Jael. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having us.
And I actually met you through a young lady I met fairly recently, like within the last month. She goes, month and a half, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
She introduced herself to me as Deliverance, and I was like, I don't know about that. Like, scary name at first. I was a little nervous because like we scheduled a lunch together, and then I was like, I had it on my calendar. I was like, I'm having lunch with Deliverance today,
Yes.
and then it
Good
felt
sister.
like I was like, it's like a message.
Right.
Lunch
In
with
itself,
Deliverance today.
yes, it is. It is.
Yeah.
And so is she.
Yeah, yeah. I love, like, I've already loved what she's brought to the table, and we're both Capricorns.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we both know, like, one of my friends calls me the Great Connector.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, like she is too. So we're already bridging each other's communities together, which
Yes.
I love to see.
Yes. We've been connected for about a year now. Around this time last year is when we connected, and I think it was through Instagram.
Okay.
And she was just noticing some of the work that we were doing in the Orangeburg community, just engaging the community, and then also seeing some of my involvement and perspective as it relates to our heritage and aligning our identity on pen and paper, to our heritage, and just that whole process. And so within the past 6 months, those have been some of the areas that we've been collaborating on, and also collaborating in areas of business related to health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's definitely a really, really good sister. She's kept me encouraged over the past year, spiritually.
Good.
She's been on my head about making sure that I do my full moon rituals and affirmations and taking spiritual baths. And this past 3 or 4 months, I had fallen off of just like praying consistently, and as soon as I had slipped off, she was like encouraging me. So she's definitely a great sister.
I like how you said encouraging, because as a fellow Capricorn, I know encouraging is more like, have you been doing this? And you're like,
yeah, she's
we
been
can say encouraging.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely a good sister, and I'm really grateful for her connectivity and bringing us together as well.
Likewise. And when you talk about discussing your heritage on pen and paper, because I know you as, I was introduced to you as Jael, but that wasn't your birth name.
Correct.
How do you just decide you're going to change your name? Like, how does that happen?
Well,
what's the process of that?
So for most people, we tend to have, or there's two types of awakenings that people usually go through. One is inner, and then the other one is like an outer awakening. And so my first inclination that I wanted to change my name actually started in middle school. We had like an assignment about looking up your name and see where it comes from. And in middle school, I saw my name was like Brandon was originates from Britain. And I'm like, I don't resonate with that. Yeah. So that was like my first seed there, knowing that at some point in time I may change my name. But it wasn't until my second year in college, I went to South Carolina State University, and some of my best friends during my second, third, and fourth years were Nigerian. And I had one good brother, his name was Emmanuel. And so the name Emmanuel, of course, has a meaning behind it, which means with God. And so it was at that point in time I had like my first just like present moment with how, people, our indigenous cultures normally would give names to children with a meaning behind it. And so that was like my second like outer awakening, or kind of both there. And just knowing that that at some point I'm going to change my name, because I knew that my name came from my mother. When she was in middle school, she used to cheerlead, and one of her cheerleading sisters had a little brother named Brandon. They used to come to practice. And so she told me that's where my name came from.
Right.
So yeah, and so, my experience on the campus of South Carolina State University was one of intention and very purposeful. And so I wanted to changed my name to one of purpose.
Right. Okay. So what does your name mean now?
So my entire name is Jael Obatala Shi Amaru Bey.
Okay.
So there's like several things going on there.
Okay.
The letter J is actually only like no more or no less than 600 years old, right?
Today, years old, learning that.
Yeah, most people don't know that the letter J didn't exist, 1,000 years ago.
Okay.
So the alternative letter for J is Y. And so the name Jael in Hebrew is spelled with a Y, and it means to shelter, build, and to shine.
Okay.
And so I think it was in 2019 when I was learning, I had just been studying for about a little over 6 months about civics, law, and jurisprudence, and learning that, our current political system and everything has been, perpetuating our ignorance and, more specifically, like our names. Most of the names that we carry are from the given names of our ancestors who were, enslaved.
Right.
And so I was becoming very mindful of that. And so at the time, when I was at South Carolina State University, I was doing a number of things. I had started an organization. I had opportunities to work with the 1890 Research and Extension and make publications, and then also to make publications in other in magazines.
Okay.
And so as I'm becoming mindful that, this name that I carry is Britton and Galloway, it's probably, like a name given from, ancestor of a slave, of a slave master. I was pretty sure that in the future, I would have opportunities to make publications, and I did not want the publications and the work and the legacy to be attributed to a European name.
Okay.
And so that was one perspective that I had in terms of my name. And then on top of that, in middle school, there was a white kid in my middle school class, or in my social studies class. His last name was Galloway. His name was Jake Galloway.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting. In this social studies class, there was a section that we went over talking about slavery and whatnot. And so there was like an indirect correlation that was openly stated.
Right. Like
And-
you could have been my family's slave master.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that was in middle school.
Right.
So, so since then, I've had that kind of inclination already open. And then on top of kind of, coming into more knowledge of self about, just our colonizers. And have you ever seen, I forgot what's the name of the movie, but there's a point in the movie where the slave is being whipped to accept the name Toby.
Mm-hmm.
And he's
I
like,
can't think of the name of that
what?
movie too,
Mhm.
but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so he's like, what's your name? And he's like, Kuta Kinte, and he hits him again until he says Toby, and he accepts that name. And so I think it's, not everybody's name doesn't have meaning or is connected to, a name forced upon through slavery, but a good majority of our people here in Native America, or here in America, actually are. And so I think it's something well worth to consider, and just be mindful of, because otherwise it's just another ignorance that, will pass on to the next generation.
Fair. I'm not going to change my name.
Mhm.
I'm quite content with my name, and it's I won't say it's funny, but I am always curious because my mother's white.
Mm-hmm.
And she's actually, and people are like, well, it doesn't count. She's British white. And I'm like, yeah, but that makes her like, she's white though.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born in England. My mother's white. Dad's black, obviously. Well, not obviously, but just so you know. But I have no problems with my name, but I am always curious, like my heritage and my background, like I probably have both sides. Like I
Right.
probably have slave masters and slaves, but like there's no telling with, you know, the way my family system set up how that may have worked out. But I'm quite content with Shiana.
But that's a beautiful name.
Thank you. And I actually had somebody on the podcast before discussing just different sounds and how different sounds within names mean different things, and how is associated with God.
Yes, it is. Yeah, that was one of the first things that I learned. I think it was like in 2019 when I was like, okay, what am I going to change my name to? And yes, the enunciation or Yah is like giving reverence to God.
So I was like, oh, I got like a double Shiana. Yeah. So how did your mother feel about you changing your name? Was she like, yeah, it's fine? Or was she upset about it?
I wouldn't say she was upset, but she definitely wasn't like, oh, it's fine. And so my whole experience in kind of embracing this inner awakening has been one that has had a lot of like resistance, you know, from family initially.
Don't they all? Or like, don't we all have the resistance from family or loved ones?
Right. Aren't we all the black sheep?
Right.
That's why we're here now.
Well, not all, but those of us that, of us that are speaking now. Yeah.
Yeah. So like some of the things that I was waking up to, well, let me take a couple steps back. So my first inner awakening was actually in 2016 when I actually gave my life to Christ. And so,
and when you say that, were you like in the church getting baptized and head dipped in the water situation?
Yeah. So I was in Orangeburg, and coming out of high school, I always wanted to have a relationship with God, but it wasn't until I got away from my family and, you know, I was able to, you know,
think for yourself.
And so, you know, I found this church right across the street from South Carolina State University, New Mount Zion Baptist Church. And it honestly became like a pool of wisdom and like a resource for me to, you know, to bring myself to God and to cry out and to, you know, be comfortable with just crying out. And not only that, but, you know, also at that time, like I was still young and, you know, drinking and things of that nature, but not once did I ever feel compelled to feel guilty for what I was doing, but still coming to God. And so the fall semester of my sophomore year, I was actually like kind of spiraling into a depression, like, and so it got so bad. Like if I didn't go to church on a Sunday, I didn't know how I was gonna make it through, you know, the following week, because my roommates, they was drinking and smoking throughout the week, and it's just so easy for me to like, you know, slip into that. And so towards the end of the semester, like I literally had nights where, you know, I'm trying to do my work, I couldn't do anything. I wasn't waking up until like 10 minutes before class, just because I didn't have this like passion or this flame.
Yeah.
And so my cry out to God was like, show me who I am, you know, reveal to me my purpose and my passion. Excuse me. And so I had something else happen over winter break where I could have ended up in a hospital, but I didn't. And so when I came back in the spring, you know, I had all the reason to know that, you know, God had a purpose for me, and I was ready to like give my life to that purpose and to learn more about it, and and I was ready to get out of my own way. And so my inner awakening was about, like I said, just submitting to the will of God, accepting that there is a certain will over my life. And then where it led me was to understanding my childhood traumas, and it led me to healing, you know. And so most of my childhood traumas comes from the relationship that I had or I didn't have with my mother. You know, she had me when she was very young. And so we grew up together, you know, like brothers and sisters. And so a lot of my communication with women, I was beginning to recognize that something's not right. And
I got mommy issues.
Yeah, and it's me. And so that was my first inner awakening. My second awakening was the following year, and I would accredit it to three things. The first woman, Dr. Joy DeGruy Leary. She's a Black woman who has a PhD in psychology and a dissertation written on post-traumatic slavery disorder.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
And so listening to some of her her lectures on YouTube, along with watching Hidden Colors, those were like my first outer awakenings to like kind of realizing, okay, our community relative to the society that we're in. And then on top of like, you know, the fact that history has been so whitewashed. And so all of those things kind of led up to me having this position against the current like system. And so the reason I mention all of that is because as it relates to my mother accepting my name change and this new direction that I'm headed towards was that my mother, she's a police officer. Not only that, she worked her way up to become a sergeant and lieutenant and detective. And now she's a captain. And so there was like I said, there were some instances there where, you know, the truth that I was speaking was an attack on her identity.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So.
And my mom's Catholic, so my my like timeline of my healing and the work that I do was very confusing for her. And again, she's white, so even when I was like, hey, you know, I have to like, you know, I'm Black, right? And she was like, like I don't see you as Black, and I was like, yeah, but everybody else does, and like I am, and like you got to start seeing it too. So I think, especially our generation, because I figure we're close in age. I'm not sure your age actually at all.
Yeah, I'm 26.
Oh no, we are not close in age. But
Are you in Deliverance about the same age?
No, I'm in my mid 30s.
Yeah, she's 36.
Okay, yeah. So for me, my mom was just like, I don't know about that, and I was like, oh yeah, like she never had to address it before.
Yeah,
but I think
it was a conversation she never had.
Yeah. But like I know part of my generation.
Are you the only child?
I'm the youngest.
Oh, you're the youngest.
I'm the youngest. But like part of my generation, there's a placement that a lot of us have, and I talk about it often on here and on Instagram and stuff. Is it's Pluto and Scorpio placement.
Oh yeah.
And like we are very much here to be the ones that are like we're very much the millennial generation that is like y'all been fucking all this up. Like this is not right. Like let's fix this. And I feel like the Pluto and Scorpio generation are the ones that are in therapy. Are the ones that are like, all right, like y'all have been doing this all the way wrong.
Right.
And you guys have been lying to us about A, B, and C. And the Pluto and Scorpio generation are also the ones that are like, y'all said like there's no cure for this and like that this isn't treatable and stuff, but that was a lie too.
Right.
So, but this is the work that you're doing now. So before your awakening, were you already studying naturopathy?
No.
Okay. What were you studying?
So I went to South Carolina State for electrical engineering.
Okay.
And then I ended up changing over to civil. And so when I was there, when I started the organization, the Environmental Action Club, it put me into this network known as like the Environmental Justice and Climate Justice Network. And
which is obviously a thing these days, climate change.
And so what that did was it kind of also shaped my perspective and approach as like, okay, if I'm going to be an engineer, I want to be an engineer relative to renewable energy. So that's why I shifted to civil engineering. And then along the way, I also got an internship that paid for a minor in environmental science.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until the summer of 2017 that I like truly expressed the desire to get a technical background in nutrition. And so this was about 2 or 3 months after I had made my transition out of eating meat. So that came about in February of 2017. And so
what made you decide like that I'm going to do this? I'm going to stop I'm going to try to be vegan?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I appreciate that question.
Because it's not for me personally.
Yeah, so for me, I told you 2016 gave my life to Christ, and I was really like leveling up in some areas, spiritually, and just, really coming into wisdom. And on top of the organization that I just started, and how, just my path and my experiences were becoming very distinct. And so towards the end of 2016, like that whole fall semester, I was going to Bible study every Wednesday. I was singing on the choir. One thing that I also love to do is to do praise and worship dance. So I was doing a little bit of that when I wasn't traveling. And so the end of the year came, and I was really like, okay, what can I do to become closer, or to just be more sensitive to, God speaking to me and having, this greater will over my life. And so it was in February. The flu was going around campus really bad. Teachers and students was getting sick left and right. And I caught like a 2-day virus going into the weekend. And so one thing that I've always done since my sophomore year, I've always found myself being, I've always found others like wanting to work out with me. And like, so I've always found myself doing like group workouts and leading group workouts. And so I became an RA my sophomore year in the spring, and like 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I had like at least 5 to 10 guys over a span of a few weeks, working out with me. And so this was going on when this happened. And so I caught this 2-day virus going into the weekend after I threw up from drinking milk during breakfast after a workout, which has never happened before. Mm-hmm. And, at that time, I used to drink like at least 2 cups of whole milk a day, with dinner.
Well, I think we all did, though, at some point. Like, especially my generation, because I'm the generation that had the Got Milk commercials.
Oh, okay.
So, like, this was embedded in our system.
Yeah, seriously. And so over that weekend, when I had that 2-day virus, the most I did was read and sleep. And so one of the things that I came across was learning about how our pineal gland is where all of the spiritual activity, feeling of the Holy Spirit, hearing God's voice, or that godly intuition, all of that takes place within the pineal gland. Mm-hmm. And then I also learned that, the standard American diet, it debilitates the function of the pineal gland. So
including our water.
Exactly. And so that was, one of the things that I was learning over this weekend. The other side was becoming a little bit more present with how much energy we have to put into food, like animals, for it to be even digestible by us. We have to raise the vibration to it. And so just that coupled with the traumatic experiences that most of these animals are going through prior to it getting onto our plate, and how, energy doesn't die, it only transfers. And so I became a little present with like, how we're consuming these traumatic experiences when these animals are being killed in fear. And so that Sunday when I finally was able to eat, they had like some rotisserie chicken, and I went to go take some bites, and I just couldn't even chew it the same no more.
Oh, man. And rotisserie chicken's always a good choice.
Yeah. And so, but my transition wasn't like cold turkey. Like I was still doing eggs and fish. So I was pescatarian. Mm-hmm. And then, I actually lost my taste for fish and eggs by the end of the summer. And
I often lose my taste for eggs. It's like it's a hit or miss thing for me. Like sometimes I'm like, eggs all the way. I want them fried. I want them scrambled. I want them however I can have them. And then sometimes I'm like, they smell disgusting. I don't want to look at them. I don't want to see them. I don't want them in my fridge. So it's like a love-hate relationship with eggs. Okay. But I hear a lot of people are like that too. So I don't know what it is about eggs, but it's a thing.
Yeah. So that was, so now this is in February, and this is, mind you, this is a couple of weeks or a couple of months before the season of Lent, which is, in the Christian tradition, that's the time period at which Jesus tells the people to, or encourages the people to abstain from food. And why? So that they can become closer to God. And so the big light bulb that I had go off in my head was like, wow, imagine how close you would become, abstaining from these foods that are causing you spiritual fog and etc. Just imagine if you're able to get this close or become this more inclined to the Spirit of God
throughout the year
for 30 days. Just imagine what a lifestyle would be, no longer consuming these types of food. And so that was like more than enough than I needed, especially just how things were aligning. And like I said, my footsteps were being ordered and how I was just going places and, having these encounters with people at these places and just being encouraged and being an encouragement to others. And so, my biggest, one of my favorite scriptures, like in my initial year in Christ, was Romans 12. And it says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, to present yourself as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto the Lord, that of which is your reasonable service. And then the second part is, do not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind and in spirit. And so, that's, what the experience, going to church was for me. I was being renewed in spirit and, just continuing to not fit in on campus.
And so I was raised, like I said, my mother's Catholic, but she wasn't, I hope she didn't hear this and be mad at me. She wasn't like real Catholic. Like she wasn't actively practice, or she was doing her prayers and her prayers to the saints and such, but we weren't going to mass or any of that. So my experience going to church growing up was very much like, I don't want to go. Cause then I ended up going with friends all the time. And it was like a requirement. Like if I stayed the night at their house, and I was like, like I was dreading it every time. Cause then we were in there for, 3 hours at a time and stuff. And I was like, is this what this experience is every time? So like, I never meshed with the church life. Like that was not my connection. I did a little bit in college somewhat with one of my good friends. The couple times that we would go together, I was like, oh yeah, I was supposed to go today. Cause like we'd leave crying because of the sermon, you know? But after you changed or transformed your life into one of the vegan lifestyle, so did that get you more connected with just like how we grow our foods and like how we're consuming our foods as well, which led you to begin your journey with gardening?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. My journey with growing food and gardening started through my upbringing.
Okay.
And so I had a grandfather who I can remember I was in like third grade going with him to different families' backyards and turning over the ground for them. And I remember one time we didn't have a tiller, or he hadn't pulled it off the truck yet or something, but for some reason he had me try to till the ground with a shovel, because we didn't always have tillers and whatnot. And so, so I have this very distinct memory of, jumping on the ground with a shovel, trying to break up the ground.
Right.
But yeah, so that was my background. And then, coming up, going through high school, that was something I still actively did with my grandfather. And then like my freshman year, the spring break of my freshman year, I went home for spring break and was spending time with my grandparents. And in that year, we planted some muscadine vines. And so every time, every spring I would come home, I was, we were preparing the garden. And so
I feel like grandparents always have the muscadines, like that. It's like a requirement or something.
Yeah, in the South. Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah. Did you make muscadine wine too, or y'all weren't into that?
No, he did. Let's see, this is 2022. I think from 2020, he actually did collect like maybe a gallon or 2 gallons of the muscadines to be pressed into a wine. But there was like one more additional filtration that was needed. And so I don't think he got a chance to do that because his health began to fall ill. And so, but how that transferred, or how that background transferred into the things that I was doing on campus and eventually what I would do in the community was just, like I said, it was something by habit and nature. But then it was also like a thing of recognizing like, okay, this is a necessity. And then not only that, you know, the next awakening that I had was the club that I started on campus, it was called the Environmental Action Club. And so it truly was a projection of the awakening that I was having and my new outward look on life. And so my philosophy then was that, you know, in order to know what we're supposed to be doing in life, we have to understand where we come from and what has shaped us. So we have to understand our environment, you know, that molded us.
Right.
So, and within that word environment, you have enviro and then you have ment, which is mental. And so it's like, once you understand your mental and how you were shaped and how you were, you know, influenced, you can now know how to take action properly, you know, how to, you know, engage the world properly. And so South Carolina State is an agricultural and mechanical land grant institution. And in the 60s, their agricultural program was taken away or was washed away right after the Orangeburg massacre. And when they desegregated, you know, schools and whatnot. So South Carolina State had a very top tier engineering program. They had a top tier law program, and I think nursing as well. And so once desegregation happened, we lost our law and nursing program because it went to USC. And so now they've opened up. And so also what happened was after the massacre, the president at the time, Dr. Maceo Nance, made a deal with the city of Orangeburg to lease, I think it was like 186 acres of the land to be developed as a golf course. And in the paper, there's a quote saying that, being developed into a golf course for the sake of reducing racial tensions in the area.
Because so many Black people were playing golf
at that
time.
Day and age, right?
Right.
And so that 186 acres, that's where they were growing their food. You know what I'm saying? That's where they had the agricultural program. That's where, you know, I also came across this article where it was like the 1890 program was sending out students as demonstration agents to surrounding farms and communities to teach them more sustainable methods to farming. And I was just like, wow, when I was like coming across this. And, you know, at this point I have the Environmental Action Club and the vision, even before had the official charter, it's like, we need to get a food garden on our campus. So that was always in mind, like, but, you know, I had to take the steps to get there. And then, of course, connecting the dot between, we don't have an agricultural program, but then look at how Orangeburg has been nationally ranked for obesity, diabetes, and comorbidities. It's been nationally ranked. And the correlation that I was seeing, like, right then and there was that we're not even growing our own food.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The absence of the institutional identity is the reason why the community is in the condition that it's in.
Right.
Come on, let's get it together.
Why does anybody else see this?
Yeah. So, and then, you know, like I said, I was just, it was a recognition of like the need, not only the need, but the responsibility, you know, for the university to have something there, you know, for the community. And it's like, at that time, you know, I realized that my principle behind environmentalism was that environment has the primary influence on the intellectual, cultural, and social development of a person or a group of people more than hereditary traits.
So in your belief, like the whole nature versus nurture debate, you're very much like it's all nature that controls people's trajectory.
No, well, I mean, I would say it's both. Since we've been colonized and since we've been integrated into the society, we have been perverted from our God-given nature.
Right.
There's social traditions that, degrade they debilitate our health, in the long term. But, it's things that we traditionalize and, socialize in. But so in terms of, just connecting the dots here, like seeing the condition of the Orangeburg community, which is like a 70% indigenous Black demographic. So the other connection here was like, if you can limit a person's ability to healthy food and their children to healthy food, you can put a cap on their trajectory. Because I also came across research that was saying like studies show that healthy breakfast, healthy meals increases academics performance. I'm like, well, dang. And here we are with all these
Adderall and all the medication.
No, not only that, but in the communities, there really isn't access to fresh and healthy foods. There's like, all of the fast food restaurants and the corner stores. And so it was just like, it was there to me in broad daylight. Like, this is where we need to start. You know what I'm saying? If we really want to evolve our community for the better, we need to focus on getting back to feeding our own community. Because right now, they've institutionalized our oppression through, limiting our excess. And, that in itself keeps us operating vibrating at a certain level. You're eating low vibrational foods all your life. You're only going to have low vibrational experiences and aspirations and perspectives. So
I don't know if you've been on Instagram recently. It was a whole video that went viral. I actually had a podcast episode maybe a couple episodes ago talking about low vibrational food and stuff, because there was a coach that was discussing her low vibrational plate, saying like, that's
that girl, when she was talking to another girl.
Yeah.
I don't know who that was when I seen that. And they was like, the comment was, this y'all leaders of the group or something. That you had posted that?
I didn't,
okay.
But
yeah,
no, because it was everywhere,
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, Lord have mercy.
Yeah, well, I mean, but so now, especially during the pandemic, I would say, I think a lot of people that weren't hit to the game beforehand were like, oh shit, like we probably need to start growing our own food.
Yeah, outer awakening.
Yeah. Especially with the cost of
inflation,
things going up, all the things going up, everything's high. So you help people put gardens together now.
Yes, that's what we were doing with our organization on campus. A couple years ago, we caught a grant before we built the food garden on campus, we landed a grant with the Regional Medical Center to build food gardens at local schools. And so there was about 4 different schools that we was able to get into and, build some food gardens. But like 2019.
You say it so casually, like that's not a big deal, by the way. So kudos to you, because you were very like, a couple food gardens, like that's a very big deal. So yeah, kudos to you for that.
Thank you. And it's just, like I said, it's just an answer to the call, and just, God giving me vision and just like wisdom to connect the dots here. Because, I mean, you would think that, everybody would connect the dots here.
Y'all should see this, yeah.
So that was on campus. And then, by 2019, I was like, there was a lot of momentum behind the organization, and I was getting ready to, like, part of the vision behind it was to evolve it to a nonprofit. And the chapter on campus was going to be like a student chapter of the nonprofit. But then I had started studying civics and jurisprudence and law, and I realized that all this effort on the campus and within the jurisdiction of the campus would only go but so far, because at the end of the day, the board of directors are not people that look like you and I,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And so, so I realized that, you know, this is the right approach, but I need to, you know, take it to another level.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually, you know, pumped the brakes a little bit. Like I said, I was getting ready to get like a nonprofit status or a sponsorship. And so this is the end of 2019. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board, and I was like, and it was great when COVID came through because, you know, now
You got time to think.
yeah, not only that, but some of these obligations from seasonal events and activities don't have to hold those right now. So now I got some more time to think and to, you know, send it back to the drawing board. And so, you know, so getting to the point of like, you know, after undergrad and still carrying on that legacy and that type of work became the foundation to the business model of New Health, New Wealth. And so, you know, in 2017, I mentioned I had this aspiration to get a technical background in nutrition, but one that's more relevant to us because at the time, I had a conspiracy theory. It literally was a conspiracy theory because I hadn't heard it from anyone. It was just like, oh, it's probably what's going on here, but it wasn't confirmed or anything. My conspiracy theory was that.
Are conspiracy theories ever like fully confirmed?
Well,
or they're just left floating?
No. Conspiracy theories nowadays, 85% of them are true.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And I think a lot during the pandemic, well, it's still pandemic-y kind of, but I think a lot of people during COVID realized, okay.
Yeah, they've been on to something.
Yeah, maybe not everybody's crazy.
Yeah, so, but at this time in 2017, my theory, I hadn't heard anybody speak on it, but my theory was that, you know, all of the medicines and the standardizations of like measuring people's health, my theory was that it was standardized to the Europeans. And I know for a fact that we're not the same. And not to say that, and this is one common rhetoric that is it is misassociated, you know, that when people advocate that we're different, you know, a lot of people want to say, oh, we're all the same. We're one race, we're one species. Yeah, we're part of the same species, but we have what is called biological variance between us. And so for someone who's melanated versus someone who's non-melanated, there's a significant difference between us. And the biggest point is that it's okay that we're different, but the fact that we are made ignorant to who we truly are, and not only are we ignorant to who we are, but also the rest of the world is ignorant to who we are. So now it's not only our miseducation, but it's the miseducation of the other so-called races. Because if they had proper education as to who we are and where we come from, I'm pretty sure so-called racism wouldn't be as much of a thing, because you got to think about it, like the school systems, racism is taught. Right. It isn't, you know, an inherent
critical race theory debate that's happening still. So, but even like, you know, I've noticed even on Twitter and other social media, like just the more recent discussion of books and how a lot of like the medical books and stuff don't have like Black pictures or pictures of like, you know, Black babies being born, right, that kind of stuff. So even that's just now changing.
And trending, right?
Yeah, since forever ago. Like, and I thought about it and I was like, yeah, because like when I've been studying, because I studied massage therapy, and like when we didn't see models of Black people and like anatomy things. They weren't Black people.
Right.
And now that's like just now like being made like hey, this is a problem, y'all. Like, you see, like this is a problem, and you're discussing it like internally. We're not the same.
Right.
And that people needed to be more aware of these differences.
Right. We need to be properly educated, you know. And so initially, you know, a lot of people, when they kind of like wake up to just how, you know, society and the curriculums everything is whitewashed. Initially, we are all mad, and I know at least I was, you know, like mad at, you know, the fact that they didn't teach us history properly, mad at the fact that they didn't teach us about melanin, but yet every year and they have this conference on melanin with a bunch of Europeans there. And
What conference?
I can't remember the name of it. We may have to come back to that.
Okay.
But I know that there's a conference, and the book that references this conference is called Indigenous Food Science. And so it highlights the conference that this guy who patented synthetic melanin, he's a part of that same conference. Mm-hmm. But so the point is that I used to want to be mad, but then I got to a point where I realized, what does a chicken look like trying to teach an eagle how to fly? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So in other words, there exists an active role and responsibility for us to not only learn proper knowledge of self, but then also for us to teach our own, mm-hmm. right? As they say, education starts in the home. Mm-hmm. And then going back to, what we said earlier, we've integrated into this society where, we're being perverted away from our God-given nature. And so when you asked about the nature versus nurture, mm-hmm. I was conflicted there to accept your statement, only because in a bigger picture here, I see it being that our nature and our culture is synonymous with one another, mm-hmm. right? They're two sides to the same coin. Mm-hmm. And our nature and our culture evolves into our perception or our psychology. And from our perception and psychology, that evolves into how we circulate our energy amongst one another, mm-hmm. right? So now we're talking about our economy. Mm-hmm. And so if we have been perverted to, from our God-given nature to value all of these European or Eurocentric standards, how is that taken away from us circulating energy properly within our communities?
Right.
Right. So I realized this a couple of years ago, but like I said, as it relates to the nature versus nurture, and as that relates to, being properly educated, and how it's our responsibility to not allow our education to be limited to that which has been given to us by our colonizers.
Right.
There's a quote, it's one of my favorite quotes from Malcolm X. It says, it says something like, just because you have a degree from the white man's university doesn't mean anything. You still don't know how to help your people. You still don't know how to teach your people, get knowledge of self. And so, that was one of my other outer awakenings that I had, like my sophomore year. I had a close friend who was a senior. He left, got a job with Microsoft, and then came back on campus and was basically just like, kind of like flaunting all the perks and benefits. Mm-hmm. And this guy was really bright. And so I just realized, like, wow, corporate America comes and takes our brightest mm-hmm. out of our communities. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, our communities are still stagnant.
Right.
They're still underdeveloped. They're still broken. And, it's a good thing we have HBCUs, but how are our HBCUs like cultivating our minds to go back into our communities and be the solutions to the areas that we're hurting in the most?
Right. And what you're talking about right now is even something I've spoken on here about before. Like you can study as much as you want. You can study all the things you want to study. You can go to school and study. You can take continuing ed and study. You can self-study, but it really doesn't matter if you don't integrate the work that you're studying. Mm-hmm. And so like you're talking about, learning this and then teaching others. And right. I mean, it's the same for me. Like, and I know we spoke, you're familiar with human design. And I'm a role model hermit. Mm-hmm. And like part of my purpose in this lifetime is to go study all mm-hmm. the things and then share it.
Oh yeah. So that's exactly what we have mm-hmm. here. You know mm-hmm. what I'm saying? And it's this philosophy that I've held since like 2017. And so here, it's an acronym. The word is GHETO, mm-hmm. which stands for Gathering Higher Education to Teach Others. Mm-hmm. And so, since starting the organization on campus and all of the opportunities and experiences and places it's taken me, it has always put me in a position to bring resources back and to bring elevated perspectives back to my campus and for other students and staff to, elevate their perspective and experience in life. And
so you're not supposed to hoard it. Like, we're supposed to share it.
Right, exactly. And so, so this is, another reason why I'd like to just take this moment to acknowledge, and to just give thanks again to you for this opportunity to, for us to have this ghetto dialogue. Because, it's been a goal and an intention to get to this point. So I'm really grateful for you.
Thank you. Because we had spoken about that when we briefly spoke before this, that like, this is my first podcast for a video feature. I've had my podcast about 2 years now. But you have had it in your head that you would like to be on YouTube, like you'd like to create a platform, but what's been holding you back?
Oh yeah, man. I've been in my due diligence, somewhere in the words it says, study and show thyself approved, and so I really have been restricting myself.
We all do it though. We all do.
And not so much out of like procrastination, but like I knew that because my studies increased, my last semester at South Carolina State was in 2020. In the fall of 2019 is when I enrolled into the Aboriginal University, and I began the course to become an Indigenous naturopathic doctor.
Gotcha.
Underneath the Aboriginal Medical Association. And then in that spring, I also enrolled to take the Juris course for the tribal government that I was, getting ready to join. And so, there's study and then there's applied study as well. And it's like a lot of people, and this is the thing that I was noticing during 2020 is like a lot of people were trending and blowing up because they were hearing bits and pieces of the information and just like taking it to the airwaves and taking it to the platforms and just talking, but not really having any applied methodology, any demonstration. And so I wasn't in a rush, and I know that I needed to, take some time and to get into some depth and to have some applied studies before actually getting to this point where I'm ready to share based on my experiences and demonstration.
And that's how it was for me. Like I had all this information, I had all this knowledge, and my background is massage therapy. But before massage therapy, I was working at a hospital. So I was familiar with people's diagnoses and seeing what people came in for, and familiar with like how the healthcare system is fucked up.
Right.
That's a whole nother episode. But my thing was, I was suffering and still do from time to time from imposter syndrome, because who am I to share this information? Like, even though I've studied it, even though I got my receipts, even though I've like thrown myself into the studies for hours at a time sometimes, because it's once you start studying the things that you enjoy, the time goes on.
Yes, it goes by very quickly.
But then it was like, who am I to like share this? And then, there's that like caution, like, what if I say something wrong or like, misspeak and then offend somebody or something like that. But I've probably more so recently just come to terms with like, okay, that's a part of it. Like I'm going to offend people. And I just got to get over that. And they need to get over it too. Cause
because the truth hurts, you know what I'm saying? And the truth isn't going to fit everybody's opinion. And so that was the reality too, that I was also contending with like 2020. Like I was feeling some pressure behind that, like, coming into the foundational science, of our biological variances, right? And how traditionally it's said that, oh, go get out in the sun for your vitamin D. But when you get into the science, vitamin D is actually a hormone that is stimulated by the sun and is, released in the bodies. And then not only that, the English Journal of Science has a publication where they did this study between over 2,000 people of so-called white people and black people, and they were studying the vitamin D in these two biological variances, so much to conclude that there's two different types of vitamin Ds. There's two different types of physiological processes that are happening between these biological variances. And so, how that relates to, okay, like you said, people just get the information and they're taking and running with it just for the sake of clout. And so I know for me, not only did I not want to do that, but I also wanted to have something representative of my comprehension and application, of this science and, the lifestyle that I'm working towards and creating, not only for myself, but for others to, elevate their perspectives with.
So I shouldn't be telling people to go outside for their vitamin D?
No, it's essential. Vitamin D is,
because I tell people all the time, make sure you go outside, because I'm
it's a
also an
part of our
earth sign.
immunity. Oh, yeah?
Aren't you an earth sign?
Yeah, I am.
And I always say, like, earth signs especially, like, we need to be in touch with our element. Like, we need to be outside.
Exactly. So, yeah, definitely keep encouraging people.
Okay. All right. Just making sure.
Yeah. And so
needed to check myself just in case.
yeah. So, vitamin D is essential. It plays a role in our immunity. And so there's so many distinct differences, between a melanated person versus a non-melanated person and their interaction with the sun.
Gotcha.
We talked about earlier, we talk about our culture and our nature being two sides to the same coin. I was realizing this in 2020. I was like, wow, here you have two types of people on this planet, essentially. One is trying to block out the sun, and the other one is, made to bask in all its glory.
Right. Except that one time I was in Mexico and got very, very sunburned. So, other than that, I can be in the sun all day.
Yeah.
But Mexico sun does not like my skin as much as South Carolina sun.
Oh, yeah.
I was I had my whole forehead was peeling. It was like just my forehead got burnt and like the tops of my cheeks. But
yeah. And so even that, like there's a whole, stipulation behind like, okay, we're melanated, we're for the sun, or no, we still need to wear sunscreen.
Right.
And so the reality, the deeper aspect to it is that if you look at the people who, are melanated and they do get sunburned, look at their diet. And
I was definitely drinking heavily on the boat in Mexico.
Yeah, so, the sun is going to burn away, the toxins, and that's what the sunburn is. And so, for people who do get sunburned, who are melanated, that's all it is, Clean up your diet and then go to the sun.
And then you won't get sunburned.
Yeah, do an experiment on yourself.
Noted.
Do an experiment on yourself where you're eating dairy, alcohol, sugar for the first 5 weeks of the summer. Go get out in the sun. See what the sun do to you.
I don't want that experiment. I'm gonna just learn from what you said to begin with. I don't need to test.
Okay.
The rest.
So this is for others though, because like
they should just go the other way too. Just clean up your diet and don't get sunburnt.
I wish it was that simple for everybody, but some people got to be made out of.
Yeah.
So because there's a lot of commercials where there's these indigenous Black women promoting sunscreen. It's like, what in the world? But
right,
But
I mean, commercialism, like that's the way of. I want to say it's the way of the world, but it's especially the way of the U.S. So
yeah, and so
they gotta make their money.
Right, and so, but just to the point about like people are totally convinced that they need sunscreen. I'm like, okay, just do this little experiment. First 5 weeks, cut out milk, cut out eggs, cut out sugary drinks and alcohol for 5 weeks and see how your skin does in the last 5 weeks of summer, and make the comparison and see if you actually really need sunscreen.
Interesting. And I actually have a friend, I'll have to make sure she listens to this episode, and she's one of my, like, I call it like a super friend, because she's she's also Taurus, but she's very diligent and making sure she's at the gym all the time. She's also she's a very clean eater. But she's allergic to sunscreen. She is allergic to sunscreen.
Imagine that.
Right. So I find that interesting. But, she otherwise has a clean diet and does well for herself with that. So I'm like connecting dots in my head for that too now. So, but then moving forward, one of the other things we discussed that I was like, I've got to have you on here to talk about this at some point is I discuss a lot of different I call them all different maps. I've been introduced, especially in this world, I've been introduced to everything from obviously astrology, because I know I know all my houses, my rising, my sign, all of those things. And then I talk on here about human design. I talk on here about, there's something else that I kind of mentioned to you called Qi-Men, and that's like Chinese metaphysics. But then when I was introduced to you, I was told you did something called cosmology, and I was like, what is this now? Like, and I feel like, again, because of that whole, with my role model hermit thing, learn the things and share the things.
Right. Ghetto.
So I feel like, look at me being ghetto.
Right.
I feel like part of what I'm here to do is also just share, like, here's another map, everybody, like, look into this, because maybe you'll resonate with this more, because again, not all of the maps everybody's going to understand.
Right.
Because I know if I were to look at other than MapQuest, back in you didn't use MapQuest.
I remember printing them out for some people.
All right. So yeah, like, other than, the MapQuest directions, all these maps are different for different eyes.
Right.
So what is cosmology?
Yeah, so cosmology is the science of our ancestors native to the Americas. And cosmology, simply put, cosmology is the study of celestial bodies and their influences on one another and organisms, on this planet, the influence of organisms on this planet. Okay. And so specifically, our perspective and my perspective of cosmology deals with the correspondence between consciousness, magnetism, and psychological behavior. Okay. And so if you're familiar with the various states of consciousness, being that, like, you and I right now, we're operating on a beta consciousness level, and that's somewhere between 12 to 15 cycles per second, right? We're active, engaged. The next level is alpha, and then theta, delta, and then 0 cycles per second. And so what this describes is the electrical current, or the cycles per second of consciousness that exist, as a frequency in your brain pattern. And so as it relates to cosmology, the original study of cosmology gave birth to all of these other systems, like astrology. Astrology is a Greco-Romanized version of cosmology. Gotcha. On top of that, it's actually like 28 degrees off, but we'll save that detail for another one.
That's another time.
And so this system of cosmology that our ancestors native to the Americas, who are misnomered as the Olmec or the Mayan, both of those names are names that were given to them, much like Black and Negro and African American.
And Brandon.
No, but that was my mom. My mom wasn't a colonizer. She did. Yeah. But so the point is that our people, our ancestors, who did they call themselves? They called themselves the She. And the word She is a word for people of the tree. Ooh.
Shiana, I'm sorry, go ahead. I
had a moment. You're already there.
I had a moment.
It's okay. Have your moments. Right. And so the original study was based on a point in time when the magnetic field around Earth was stronger than what it is now. So right now, Earth's magnetic field is on a level of what is known as the Schumann resonance. You've heard of that before? Okay, good. So there was a point in time when the magnetic field of Earth was at 13 cycles per second. And at that point in time, the entire planet was subtropical, freshwater only. And I think this is when the plates were together, right? And so during that time, the She people had created this calendar system that we refer to as cosmology, that not only was a system used for, for dating, but it was also a system used for understanding psychological profiles based on the 13 correspondences, right? That number 13 is very, very
Always.
significant, right?
Always.
And it's in front of us in so many different places. You know, you think about like in Christianity, how there's 12 disciples and Jesus is the, you know, the 13th in the picture. So
13 and 7.
exactly.
Always.
So, so cosmology, like I said, that's the foundation of it. And not only is the system originally created for a calendar, but it's also used as a system of divination and being able to look at the manifestation of energy at any given point in time, whether it be past, future, or present.
Gotcha.
And so this system of cosmology is very simple, actually. My background experience with astrology was very limited. Like I tried it back in like 2017, 2018, but it wasn't until my studies in as a naturopathic doctor that it became integrated, because those aspects correspond to different aspects of health.
Right. And I have a friend in herbalism school right now. So she shared, some of the information with me, very similar, like learning about the herbs and the energetics of the herbs around the planets and around the different things that are happening with the planets, cycles and what's going on, like when Mercury's in retrograde, what herbs to have around that time, and whatever other planets are doing their thing, the herbs to have around the time for those too.
Yeah. So another more specific example is like how there's the 12 zodiacs, which is also a misnomer. The better or proper term would be polarities, right? Because the zodiacs are representative of 360 degrees and 12 different sectionals of 30 degrees. And so there's a correspondence between the zodiacs, the 12 zodiacs or 12 polarities, and there's 12 main body systems, or 12 main systems.
Like the meridians?
Is that similar? That's one of the systems.
Oh, okay.
The meridian system is the what is known as the 11th polarity.
Okay.
So, but back to the cosmology. I'll deviate. I'm sorry.
Yep.
It's all interconnected though.
Yeah.
So cosmology, like I said, is a psychological study of ourselves and a system used to, study others. And so the first value that I was introduced to having this knowledge was in terms of birth planning, so there's a book that one of that our chief of the tribe wrote. It's called Immaculate Conception. And so one of the things
It's a restaurant here, by the way.
Oh, really?
Or it's Immaculate Consumption.
Oh, okay. Ooh, that's a nice spin right there.
Yeah.
So he was emphasizing a couple of years ago, he wrote this book called Immaculate Conception. And one thing that he always advocates, and I advocated as well, is about, us planning the birth of our children and knowing the psychology of the children that we're giving birth to, and so now being that much intentional with, okay, what type of family are we building here? Are we a family that's going to get into medicine or law or, insurance? But, when you know the psychology of the child that you're going to give birth to, or what type of child that you want to give birth to that fits into the family mission, this is reverse engineering to creating our community.
Well, because I've said, like I don't want to make a Scorpio baby. Personal preference there.
Yeah,
but similar mindset already.
Right, exactly. And so, in terms of cosmology, it's a tool to for you to become more self-aware. It's a tool of self-awareness.
Okay.
And so, ultimately, like I said, there's 13 aspects like in a reading that you'll get. And this reading is based on the 52 deck of cards, which is what
like
the
just
system.
Playing cards.
Yeah, just playing cards. So that's what the 52 deck of cards originates from this system. And so each card represents basically a dysfunctional manifestation of the energy or a functional manifestation of the energy.
Okay.
And so 13 different aspects, going from Mercury, which deals with how you think, brain, and communicate.
Communication.
Things from commerce, to Venus, which commonly is like love, marriage, beauty. But I describe the Venus aspect as like how you engage with the inner child of others. And just in my own self-studies here and just noticing. And then comes Mars, which is your aggression, your passions, and what you take action on. And then Jupiter is in the system here is like
expansion for me.
growth, expansion, and luck. And then after Jupiter comes Saturn, which is structure and
Very
organization.
familiar with Saturn. I'm
You are. That's
Capricorn.
Your,
Yeah.
you're ruled by
Yeah,
Saturn.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I got now that my 28 degrees off zodiac information. But yeah, I got a Capricorn stellium. So I'm very Saturnian.
Okay. Yeah, so after Saturn comes Uranus, right? Uranus deals with things suddenly, groups, and like quick changing, or things very quickly. And then the final or the last two planets are Neptune, and Neptune deals with imagination, creativity, and spirituality. And then of course Pluto. But the first 7 aspects of your reading, and just when it comes to reading like your psychology or somebody else's, or if you're reading your energy on a week-to-week basis, or on a 52-day period, or on a 7-year cycle, it's always going to be in that 7 increment pattern. And so it goes beyond, the Mercury through Pluto into like, some other aspects. But so the cosmology that we do, and the readings that we perform are having a look at your psychological aspects and bring you into self-awareness of your functional side and your dysfunctional side.
Gotcha.
And so now you're able to realize your behavior, and if you're operating in the dysfunction or the functional, because the thing about energy is that it's expressed as a polarity, right? And so the one common thing between this system and astrology is that, how there's a main 3 in astrology, which is your sun, moon, and your rising. What are yours?
I'm Capricorn sun, Leo moon, and Cancer rising.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I know someone who has a Leo moon.
That's very inner
Moon
child,
Leo.
playful energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel like the Leo moon is what helps me with this for sure. Because
Really?
that's big creative energy from the
Yeah.
heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my 3 are, I'm a Taurus, sun, and moon, and my rising is Leo.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I always say you can tell people that have Leo in their top 3 by their hair, by their mane.
Mm-hmm.
It's always, there's something different about their hair.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, a friend just sent me a video, and he was definitely highlighting that part there. So in this system of cosmology, there's 3 main cards. The first card is your sun card. That's the card that's based on your birth date. And the second card is what we call the planetary ruler. Now, what would you guess that to be
For mine,
in general, what that card is?
oh, the moon, not the moon.
Your planetary ruler, what do you think that card is?
Like in the deck of cards?
No, just in general.
Oh, I don't know.
So the planetary ruler is basically the planet that you're ruled by.
Oh, okay. So yeah, mine would be Saturn.
It would be Saturn.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, I'm a Taurus, or second polarity. The planet that I'm ruled by is Venus.
Right.
So, and you remember there's a Mercury card position, a Venus card position, all the way to the Saturn. So you would go to that Saturn card position to find, the card for that area.
Gotcha.
And then the third card is what is called the key card, or the master card. And so the difference between the planetary ruler and the key card is that the planetary ruler is how you use your sun card psychology.
Gotcha.
It's like how you use it in this world.
Right.
And then your key card is like what you must master to ignite both of the two.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And that's in how I'm translating it in my mind, because of my understanding of astrology things, is like my sun sign is how I appear to others, but my rising sign is how others see me and how like I move about. So like me being a Cancer rising, I'm very much a nurturer. So some of it's mom vibes,
Right.
But it's also very much, I say, like, because of the polarity of my Cancer and Capricorn, because of that, I'm a compassionate asshole. So it makes sense that it's, I have both in the mix, and then I got some fire there to like make sure I'm not just stuck in the mud all the time.
Right. And I resonate with that too, you know. But so that's just like a snippet of, what cosmology is. And you're right, I do these readings, and my brand of the reading is called Key to Self.
Okay.
And so
and it's spelled differently.
Yes.
It's not SELF.
It's CELLPH. So we all start from one single cell coagulating in blood with an egg. And so in terms of, just how our entire body works, every single cell in our body has a magnetic field around it. And cells make up tissues, and tissues make up organs, and organs make up systems.
Connected to the hip bone. And
yep. So this is what we mean by self, and that's why I emphasize CEF. So, if you're interested, or, you may have some of your followers here interested in
absolutely
having a reading done, you can book that on our website.
I'll put it in my show notes and everything so that they have access to it.
And the name of the service is called, the name of the service is called Key to Self, Key to Self reading. And so, in that reading, like I said, we go over your 13 aspects and the support cards, just for your sun card.
Okay.
But we reveal the other 2 cards, but that's something that you can go and apply, and learn yourself, because I think the best way to learn this system, for it to be relevant and actually for you to get the full benefit of it, is for you to do a self-study. And so,
isn't that the same for like all of this information?
Yeah. So let's talk about like why this map is not only beneficial, but why do we need to get back in touch with the science of our heritage? So the science of our heritage, as I mentioned earlier, is the science of our ancestors. And prior to things shifting dramatically, like our communities were so much further on point. Everybody was on purpose. And so one thing that I love here about even the system itself, like the plates that we read from, the arrangement of the cards were based on 2 different points in time. So there's an arrangement of the cards that was based on when the magnetic field was at 13 cycles per second. And then that's known as the cosmic spread. And in Key to Self, we call that the higher self. And then there's the other spread that is called the life spread, or the mundane spread. And that arrangement of cards is based on after the magnetic field dropped. And so the arrangement of cards is shuffled to a whole different energy. And so it's just beautiful, though, that like you can see, okay, how your energy manifests on the worldly, but then also what your higher self, psychology of your higher self is. And as that relates to us getting back in purpose, there's a very fundamental aspect to the original divine order. And at the crown line of the cosmic spread, there's a king of spade, a queen of spade, and a jack of spade. And that right there is, symbolic of just the natural order of the family, right? And so there's a lot of principles there, that are being attacked and destroyed and perverted away from in this, society that we're in now. But so when we talk about getting to the science of our heritage, we're getting back into divine order,
right?
And restoring divine order. So this system here, if people are bringing this system and this reading to you with that perspective in mind, then you definitely should, tap in with them. Because what I realize is that there's a couple of people out here using this system, but they're not connecting our heritage, our cultural identity and heritage to it. They're not bringing people to that connection.
Gotcha.
And so it's definitely fundamental to have.
So, okay, this is me being me. Are white people allowed to get this reading?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's for everybody. Okay. Yeah, I'm not gonna say it's like as just for so-called Black people. But yeah, this is
Making sure.
this is the original system.
Got it.
Mhm.
Okay. So they can still benefit.
Yeah, and then so once you understand yourself, so there's a expression on Key to Self, and it says that the universe is an algorithm that can be intelligently observed and calculated, therefore foretold and prophesied. So now you can understand the divination behind this system, right? And so now, having this system back into our hands allows us to become more responsible for the realities that we're creating. In fact, it enables us to become co-creators,
Right.
even the more,
Right.
right? And so now we can strategically plan,
Based on this information that we have.
right, about ourselves, and recognizing the potentials of energies that we're going to have at certain different times of the year. And which is another reason why I'm here at this point in time with you, right?
Because you looked at your own cards and you were like, oh, this week looks most ideal.
Yeah.
It's like, you found that out with looking at some playing cards?
Essentially, yeah. And so for me, just a little snippet here, I am in so take a step back. We all go through 7 52-day periods in a year.
Okay.
7 times 52 is 364, right? And so the point is, I'm in my Jupiter phase right now, and my Jupiter phase is
Ideal for this discussion because expansion.
Right. And then on top of that, the card for my 52-day Jupiter phase that I'm directly under the influence of, and which is also the theme for my year, is a 10 of club. And so the 10 of club card is known as the teacher's card. Demonstrate success in the public with demonstration of knowledge.
Okay.
So early this year, when I seen I was going from plate 25 to plate 26, and I'm looking at my year, I'm like, dang, I got this 10 of club in my Jupiter. I gotta get the ghetto up this year. Like,
it's gotta get started.
This has got to be the year that we get the ghetto going.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm glad you stepped out the box to give it a whirl.
Yeah.
Finally.
It was now or never. Like.
Yeah. I am curious to see, because like I said to you before this interview today, like I already know I'm here to teach. Like that's a part of so I'm sure I got some 10 of clubs things happening in the mix.
Right.
So yeah, I'm definitely curious to learn more, to see what the cards hold for me.
Yeah, what cards you got to play with in life, right?
So yeah. Well, thank you for joining me today. Very excited.
It has been a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
You're welcome. And like I said, I'll include in the show notes all your information so people can get in touch with you. But after today, what do you see moving forward for yourself and for Ghetto?
So after today, actually this weekend we have a community engagement at a church in the upstate. And so it's our plan to be doing online workshops, and then, connecting with the community, getting contact information to, tell them about our upcoming events and the things that we're going to have in person later on this year. Gotcha. So that's pretty much a summary of, how we're going to be moving forward with the Ghetto, and, and engaging the community with the Ghetto.
Perfect. Love to hear it. All right. Well, thank you again. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you.